The Velcran cubs had been watching Dr. Sarah Chen for 3 days now. Their massive heads, each the size of a shipping container, poked through the canopy of the forest moon where her research station sat. 6 pairs of golden eyes tracked her every movement as she went about her daily routines. Most humans would have evacuated immediately. The Velcran were apex predators, capable of tearing through starship hulls with their crystalline claws. Adult Velcrans had wiped out entire colony settlements before the Galactic Council learned to negotiate with them. But Sarah had studied their behavior for 2 years, and she recognized something the evacuation protocols didn't account for: curiosity. These weren't hunters. They were juveniles, probably no more than 15 solar cycles old, and they were fascinated by her. Sarah stepped out onto her observation deck that morning with her portable cooking unit, the same one she'd brought from Earth. The cubs' heads perked up immediately, their ear ridges standing at attention. She smiled and waved at them like they were neighborhood cats, not creatures that could swallow her whole. "Good morning, babies," she called out in Standard Galactic. The translators embedded in their neural patterns would convert her words. "Today I'm making something special." The largest cub, the one with a scar across its snout that she'd nicknamed Striker, let out a low rumble. Not aggressive, just interested. His siblings pressed closer, their bodies hidden behind the massive trees, but their heads forming a semicircle around her deck. Sarah had noticed something important during her observations. Velcrans ate their prey raw, tearing into flesh with efficient brutality. But they always paused before eating. They would sniff, sometimes for several minutes, analyzing scents with their sophisticated olfactory systems. They appreciated smell the way humans appreciated art. What they'd never experienced was cooking. She set up her equipment with deliberate slowness, letting them watch every step. From her cold storage, she pulled out protein samples, vegetables she'd grown in her hydroponics bay, and her secret weapon, spices from Earth: garlic, ginger, chili peppers, and her grandmother's special blend that she'd never shared with anyone. The cubs' nostrils flared. Even raw, the ingredients were producing reactions. "The thing about humans," Sarah explained, continuing her one-sided conversation, "is that we're weird about food. Most species eat for nutrition. We eat for joy." She fired up the heating element. The sizzle of oil hitting the hot surface made all 6 cubs flinch backward, then immediately press forward again. Their pupils dilated. She dropped minced garlic into the pan, and the aroma exploded into the humid air. Striker's enormous body trembled. A sound came from his throat that Sarah had never heard before, something between a purr and a whine. The other cubs were frozen, their predatory stillness complete, but every sense locked onto her cooking station. "Garlic is special," Sarah continued, stirring the pieces until they turned golden. "It doesn't taste like much raw, but heat transforms it. That's what cooking is: transformation." She added the protein, seasoned heavily, and the Maillard reaction began. The smell of browning meat drifted through the forest, and Sarah watched as every Velcran cub simultaneously sat down. 6 massive predators, each weighing several tons, settled onto their haunches like obedient puppies. They were waiting. Sarah felt her heart squeeze. In all her research, in all the brutal footage of Velcran hunts and territorial disputes, no one had ever recorded this behavior. Patience, anticipation. They understood that something was happening, something worth waiting for. She worked quickly now, adding vegetables, letting them char slightly, building layers of flavor. She tossed in her grandmother's spice blend, and the air filled with complex aromatics: cumin, coriander, a hint of cinnamon, the sharp bite of chili. The smallest cub, a female Sarah called Whisper, made a sound that almost broke her heart. It was pleading. But none of them moved. They just watched, waited. their massive forms perfectly still except for their twitching nostrils. "The hardest part of cooking," Sarah said softly, "is patience, knowing when something is ready. Rushing ruins everything." She let the dish simmer, reducing the sauce until it clung to every piece. The smell was incredible now, rich and layered and complex. Finally, she turned off the heat and let it rest for a moment. Then she portioned it into 6 large containers, each one holding about 20 pounds of food. Ridiculous portions for a human, but barely a snack for growing Velcrons. Sarah carried the first container to the edge of her deck. Stryker's head was right there, close enough that she could feel his breath. Each exhale was hot and smelled faintly of the raw kvesh he'd eaten yesterday. His eyes, golden and huge, fixed on the container. "Carefully," she said. "It's hot." She set the container on the ground and stepped back. Stryker lowered his massive head and sniffed deeply. His entire body shuddered. Then, with a delicacy that seemed impossible for a creature with claws like swords, he took a small bite. Sarah held her breath. Stryker's eyes widened. He made a sound, a high-pitched trill that Velcrans used for expressing pleasure. Then he ate the rest in 3 massive bites, licking the container so clean it gleamed. The other cubs erupted in sounds, pressing forward. Sarah laughed and quickly distributed the remaining portions. Each cub reacted the same way: shock, then pure joy, then desperate eating like they'd never been fed before. When they finished, they didn't leave. Instead, all 6 cubs lay down, forming a protective circle around her research station. Stryker rested his massive head on the deck itself, close enough that Sarah could touch his scarred snout. She did. She placed her hand on his crystalline scales, feeling the warmth beneath. "You liked it," she whispered. Stryker's rumble was softer now, content. The other cubs had closed their eyes, but their ear ridges tracked her movements. They were relaxed but alert, protecting her. Sarah sat down on her deck, her back against the research station's wall. She pulled out her datapad and began recording her observations. But her hands were shaking. The Galactic Council didn't understand humans. They thought human survival was about tool-making or social cooperation or abstract thinking. But Sarah knew the truth. Humanity's real strength was something simpler and more profound. Humans knew how to transform things. They took the raw and made it beautiful. They took the simple and made it complex. They took ingredients and made experiences. And most importantly, humans knew how to share that transformation with others. Over the next weeks, the cubs returned every morning. Sarah cooked different dishes: spicy stews, sweet and sour combinations, roasted vegetables with herb crusts. Each time, the cubs sat patiently, waiting, learning that the anticipation was part of the gift. Word spread through the Velcran territories. Adult Velcrans began appearing, cautious but curious. Sarah cooked for them too, scaling up her portions, teaching them about flavors they'd never imagined. When the Galactic Council finally sent their inspection team, terrified that Sarah had been killed, they found her research station surrounded by over 50 Velcrans. All sitting, all waiting patiently, all watching as one small human transformed simple ingredients into something worth waiting for. The inspection team leader, a Thoran administrator named Kelvik, stood frozen at the landing pad. "Dr. Chen," he transmitted, "please confirm you are not under duress." Sarah looked up from her cooking station, smiled, and waved. Behind her, Stryker gently nudged her shoulder with his massive head. "Not under duress," she confirmed. "Just making lunch. Want to stay? There's plenty." The cubs all turned to look at Kelvik. 6 massive predators, perfectly still, perfectly patient, waiting to try something new. Kelvik sat down slowly at the landing pad's edge. And for the first time in his long career, the Thoran administrator understood what made humans truly remarkable. They didn't just survive in a dangerous universe. They made the dangerous universe want to sit down and share a meal.